Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Candy Carmi, and I'm the Technical Assistance Specialist for the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. My co-presenter today is Robert Parisian, the Training Specialist for the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. Before we start this webinar, I wanted to go over some points about using the webinar software. At the beginning, at the end of the webinar, we'll have a question and answer period. If you have questions, make sure that you have a computer microphone. If not, you can use your telephone and the call-in number and audio pin that are provided on the screen. You also should have a webinar control panel on your screen, and on the bottom of that control panel is a chat box that you can type in your questions. So with that, let's get started. Application cohesion. What is it? Well, cohesion has a couple of different definitions. There's the scientific definition of the property of molecules to stick together because of mutual attraction. Well, that's not exactly the type of cohesion we're going to discuss today. Application cohesion is when the components of an application are interconnected and seamlessly tell the story of your proposed project. Why are we talking about it, and why is it important? During application review, we've noticed that some applications, while addressing the criterion, seem to be a little bit disjointed and lack connection to other components of the application. For example, while stating a problem statement, a project goal, and project objectives is technically correct, an excellent application describes the relationship and connection between the project goal, the problem, and the objectives, and how by completing the objectives, the project goal would be accomplished and the problem identified would be impacted. That's application cohesion.
Cohesiveness is similar to a jigsaw puzzle. If a puzzle is missing pieces or they are in the wrong place, you will never be able to see the entire picture. In this case, the picture is your application. From the graphics shown on the slide, each piece is connected to show the cohesiveness of each element, and throughout this presentation we're going to go over how this must be accomplished as you are writing your application. Ensuring that all components are included in your application and that the connection is evident throughout the application is what cohesiveness means in our context. The reviewers can read the whole story of what you are trying to accomplish and see the entire picture of your project. Every funding opportunity announcement, FOA, and notice of grant availability, whether it be from a federal agency, state agency, or foundation, has one thing in common, and that is that each have a specific list of key elements that must be addressed within your application submission. The following 6 elements, and sometimes there may be more, and sometimes there may be less, but the following 6 key elements are the basis for writing most applications, and each of these elements must be written in such a manner as to show there is a strong relationship or cohesiveness from one to the other. However, please be aware that these are not all of the pieces or elements that will be put into the application, as other information is also requested under specific scoring areas which also must be addressed. Each of the elements, especially the key elements, must show a strong relationship or a tie-in to each other. Let's begin with the first element.
ANA's definition of community is the stakeholders or those individuals or groups that are going to be served by this project. It's not the entire community, unless you plan on doing a project that benefits the entire community. In the graphic on your screen, all of the circles and all of the people within them could be your community, or maybe it's just the blue and yellow people. Just make sure that it's clear who your project beneficiaries are going to be. Since ANA funds community-based projects, you need to make sure that the community you are writing for has provided input into the planning process of the application development. Have they assisted in determining what you are actually going to be doing? Additionally, they should also have played a large part in determining the community's long-range goals. Disclosing these two important components in the beginning of your application shows reviewers that the community has ownership of this project and will play a large part in ensuring its success. This connection also demonstrates that the project is something that both the organization and its community desires.
The problem. This key element is one of the drivers behind the whole reason your organization is submitting a grant. It is the why of an application. In other words, it is why the organization and your community feel the need to submit an application. The problem you are addressing should be compelling and urgent. Data specific to the problem being addressed and the community of stakeholders must be provided to show the urgency. Problems are the negative conditions in your community that must be overcome or alleviated to a certain extent to make things better in the community and assist in addressing a community long-range goal. As you look at the graphic on this slide, the mountain represents the problem the community must address to achieve a community long-range goal. Once that mountain or problem is removed, then the community is well on the road to achieving their long-range goal. A good problem statement does two things for your application. It addresses problems identified during a community-based planning process, which shows cohesiveness, and addresses one of the community's long-range goals. The connection of the problem statement to the community is it shows that the community has identified a problem of vital importance to the community through a community-based planning process, and that this problem statement shows a strong connection to the community's wants and one of the community's long-range goals. Once again, cohesiveness is shown through this connection. The strategy. The strategy for your project contains some very important items that will assist the reader not only in showing cohesiveness, but also in understanding your project more thoroughly. The first of these is the project goal, which is what you are going to do to overcome the problem identified by the community and assist in addressing your community long-range goal. The project goal, once determined, becomes the focus of everything else that is written within your application. It is the foundation of your application. Everything you do and write within your application once the goal is determined is designed to do one thing, and that is to ensure that you achieve your stated project goal. The project goal is a basic description of the purpose of your project. A key thing to keep in mind is that the achievement of your project goal should alleviate or eliminate the problem your community has identified and therefore address the identified long-range goal. Oftentimes, the project goal can be written to be the opposite of what the problem statement is. The strategy, which includes the objectives, the OWPs, and the narrative approach, are how you are going to accomplish your goal to alleviate or eliminate the problem statement. The SMART objectives you develop are the steps you will take to accomplish that goal. For all ANA applications, you can only have 3 objectives per project period. SMART objectives is an acronym that ANA utilizes where the S stands for specific, the M stands for measurable, the A stands for achievable, R for relevant and results-oriented, and T for time-bound. All OWPs should be written in a SMART format. The OWP, or Objective Work Plan, is ANA's format for developing your action plan. It details through specific activities for each objective exactly what major activities in a sequential format that will take place to achieve that objective. The narrative approach is nothing more than a narrative description of all the things that go into achieving the activities to accomplish each stated objective. The OWP, because it is a form and limits detail, cannot provide enough information on its own due to the limited space you have available on that form. The narrative approach then allows you to explain each objective in more detail as to why it will work, who will be assisting, justifying timeframes and purchases related to the activities, as well as allowing the reviewers a better opportunity to conceptualize your application. Within this narrative, you will also explain how the community and stakeholders have played a role in determining project implementation. The important tie-in between the strategy, problem statement, and community then is that the goal, or what it is you are going to do, must clearly relate to alleviating or eliminating the problem statement and addressing the community long-range goal, all of which must have been determined by the community. The project goal you select determines the scope of the project you are presenting to the funding agency. Ensure that it is realistic and will address the problem statement. The objectives must show a clear relationship on how the stated objectives and activities listed on the OWP show that the objectives and OWP, as well as the accompanying narrative approach, will accomplish the goal to alleviate or eliminate the problem. All of these things must provide a cohesive connection for the reviewers to adequately review your application. Outcomes expected. What are they? Outcomes expected is the element that will show in narrative format your methodology for determining that you have accomplished your stated objectives and the ultimate impact of your project. This is the justification for your project. Here you are telling the reviewers what will happen if they fund your project. When discussing outcomes, ensure that you make those outcomes realistic and achievable. Measurable outcomes help to prove your project was successful to both the community and the funders. Results and benefits expected are a portion of the objective work plan that must be filled out to address what is produced by your project and what is achieved by your project based on your stated objectives. An important consideration is that results and benefits relate only to the specific objectives that you have written. Each objective provided must include a set of results and benefits that are separate and distinct for each objective you provide. Your results and benefits should apply only to the objective, and there should be a strong tie-in to those results to achieving the stated goal and eliminating the problem to address a community long-range goal. The impact indicator is different from the results and benefits expected, as it is the long-term outcome of the total project that describes the lasting effects of the project. In other words, it is what has changed because of the project's success. The impact indicator also must show a strong relationship to the project goal, objectives, problem statement, and community long-range goal. Hopefully what has changed is that the problem has been alleviated or eliminated.
The capacity of an organization is its ability to successfully apply its skills and resources to accomplish its goals. It includes staffing, financial resources, technology, leadership, and networks and linkages with other organizations. You demonstrate organizational capacity by providing information on your organization's program and financial management structures, personnel and financial policies. Describe your administrative structure and the systems used to track the financial and programmatic components of projects, including a listing of all sources of funding your organization currently oversees, comparable to your proposed project, shows reviewers that you have managed projects of the scope you are requesting funding for. If your organization has audit exceptions, it's a good idea to address those and explain how your organization is resolving those audit exceptions. So you've talked a little bit about your organizational capacity. Who's going to implement the project? You want to describe the process and general time frame to hire staff. Explain how the current and future staff will manage the proposed project. Include full position descriptions as an attachment. If you've already selected staff, include brief biographies and/or resumes as an attachment. If you need consultants for your project, include information on their role and also include their qualifications pertinent to the project. When developing job descriptions, remember to list the qualifications necessary to effectively do the job that is required, such as any special certifications, higher education degrees, or licensing. I read a language application where nowhere did it state that any staff had to speak the language. All of this information combined helps demonstrate that your organization has the ability to successfully implement the project. So how much is this going to cost? The project budget is a detailed description of the federal and non-federal resources that are going to be needed to carry out the project work plan. When preparing your budget, remember that you are requesting funds that are appropriate and necessary for the scope of your proposed project. Provide a detailed line item budget that displays the federal and applicant matching share budget for each year of your project. ANA requires a 20% applicant match of the total project cost. In other words, the ANA share of project cost is limited to a maximum of 80% of total project cost. Applicant match, often called non-federal share, may be in the form of cash or in-kind contributions. However, grantees are encouraged to meet matching requirements through cash contributions. Once you've completed your line item budget, you want to work on a budget justification, which is the written description that explains your line item budget, both the federal and applicant match amounts. When you're writing your budget justification, provide detail for the ANA proposal reviewers to determine if costs are allowable, relevant, and reasonable. Make sure that your written explanations are easy to understand. Explain your budget calculations and keep them basic. For example, if you include the cost for travel to a seminar in your line item budget, using your budget justification, I should be able to arrive at the same cost for that trip. Just like the line item budget, prepare a budget justification for both the federal and applicant match by budget period or year. Multi-year projects must have budgets and narratives for each year or budget period. So how do we take all of this information and put it into a cohesive application? We've discussed key elements to the application, but there are also other components that need to be included to fully tell your story. While we're discussing these components and their need for inclusion, their placement in the application will be dictated by the funding opportunity announcements once they're published. So just because we're showing them in the following locations doesn't quite mean that is ultimately where they'll end up. Make sure to thoroughly read the funding opportunity announcements once they come out.
Now from the past, these are some of the ANA elements, objectives and need for assistance. And as Candy stated, placement may differ than what we are showing you, but these are some of the elements that may show up. Commitment to community. We've already identified the community. Commitment to the community is where this element provides information to the reviewer as to what activities your tribe or organization has done in the past, both in terms of the type of project you are writing for, as well as other programs you have provided to your community to improve their well-being. This then shows that your tribe or organization is committed to assisting its community in all aspects of improving community conditions and achieving long-range community goals, as well as moving towards self-sufficiency. We discussed objectives in detail earlier, but in this context, what we're really saying is you would just list your objectives verbatim under objectives and need for assistance, specifically so that the reviewer can determine the cohesiveness of the objectives in relationship to the problem statement. Will the objectives help the applicant overcome the stated problem statement?
Remember, accomplishment of the results and benefits should lead to achieving the identified objectives. And your impact indicator should track the positive change of the condition identified in the problem statement. Coming up with an impact indicator can be difficult. With language applications, it's not as much as a problem. You only have two options. If you're teaching a language, your impact indicator needs to measure the change in language fluency for the project participants. For all other language projects, you need to measure the increase in community interest as a result of the project. Remember when you create your impact indicator that you need to choose an indicator that can be measured. You need to include baseline data on the indicator prior to grant implementation. Sometimes this information matches information provided in objectives and needs for assistance. You also need to provide an end-of-project target number, or what you expect to have achieved at the end of the project. Because ANA works to fund projects that have continued impact in their communities, you also need to provide a target number for 3 years after the project has concluded. The impact indicator identifies what long-term change is created by the project. In addition to providing a projected level of positive change, ANA sees the impact indicator as a gauge of project sustainability.
Other elements of the approach could include contingency planning, and contingency planning is simply this. Your application is based on a series of assumptions on how you hope your project will progress. What happens if something goes wrong? Identifying a set of specific actions to reduce negative impacts on the project in the event challenges come up is exactly what contingency planning is. The challenges you describe should directly relate to the assumptions you have made regarding the project's implementation. A good way to conceptualize assumptions is that they are nothing more than your activities as listed on the OWP. Which of the major activities listed have the potential to delay or possibly derail your project should they occur? Remember, you don't need, not all of the activities have that potential. Only list those that could possibly impede progress should that challenge occur. A good challenge to address would be difficulties with hiring project staff, or what you would do if a key staff member was to leave. A poor example of a challenge would be that you'll form a committee to address project contingencies once you're funded. Contingency planning is your go-to plan should a challenge occur. What would you do to overcome that challenge? This shows good planning on the applicant's part and shows that you have thought of every potentiality that could exist within your project. Another element is community participation and awareness. Describe how you plan to keep the community engaged and informed about your project. The community was involved in the project development, and they should be kept up to date on your project throughout its implementation. Ensure that you include information in the narrative approach section, as well as an activity on your objective work plan for this. Sustainability plan. Describe your plans to ensure that the impacts of the project will continue after the project period is ended. Remember that ANA only provides seed money. They fund projects, not programs. So you must have a sustainability plan in place. If you're creating products, how will these be preserved for future generations? Take some time in developing your sustainability plan. It should be more comprehensive than merely stating that you intend on applying for more grants. And finally, under approach, partnerships and leveraged resources. How will your partners contribute to the implementation and sustainability of your project? This element speaks directly to sustainability also. A target number should be included as to how many partners you currently have and how many you hope to gain during the life of the project. The same for leveraged resources. Leveraged resources will normally come from your partners, and a dollar value should be listed to show how much you hope to get during the life of the project. However, ensure that you never put a leveraged dollar amount in the budget. It does not belong within the budget.
We already discussed budgets and budget justifications under the required resources key element, but I want to emphasize that when you create your budget, you include the cost for all activities described in your OWPs and project strategy. The budget and the OWPs are the two parts of an application that should most closely align. It's not uncommon during panel review of the applications for reviewers to find costs in the budget that are not discussed either in the narrative or in the OWPs. Including the cost for a riding lawnmower in a budget for a language application might raise an eyebrow, unless its use is described in your narrative and activities included in the OWP. Conversely, make sure that you budget for everything that you discuss in your narrative. Are you attending a conference? Did you include the cost in your budget? Are you sending out a survey to the tribal membership? Did you include the cost of postage? It's always a good idea to have someone else review your budget for calculation errors and omissions.
In review, let's go over the importance of the 6 key elements of completing your ANA application. As we discussed earlier, your community is of constant and vital importance to not only the development of your application, but also the implementation of your project. The community is your catalyst for determining your long-range goals based on problems or current negative conditions that exist within your community, prioritizing these goals, and selecting the project that is most critical to be solved with ANA funds. The problem is why you are writing the grant. The problem selected by the community is of important significance to the community and must be addressed so that it can be alleviated or eliminated. The strategy is both what you are going to do and how you are going to do it to overcome the problem and address the community's long-range goal. As we stated earlier, what you're going to do is your project goal and is the foundation of your project. Everything you do after identifying the project goal and the problem statement is designed for one thing, to achieve that goal and overcome your problem. The OWP is the blueprint for your project or your action plan with step-by-step specific activities listed under each to assist you in achieving your goal. The narrative approach is a more complete picture in narrative format of what you are going to do to accomplish your goal and overcome your problem. The objectives, OWPs, and narratives of the strategy are how you are going to achieve your goal. The outcomes expected are your results and benefits, which relate only to the objectives and OWPs and measure what is produced and achieved. The impact indicator relates to the overall project and measures the change in your community. Your capacity shows that your organization and staff have the capability and know-how to accomplish all the activities to achieve the objective, attain your goal to overcome your problem, which will address a stated community goal. Finally, the budget is the dollar amount to achieve all of the activities to successfully complete your project. Its cohesiveness is shown by ensuring that all dollar amounts listed apply only to the activities and the objectives to achieve your stated goal. The other scoring elements of an ANA grant are just as important as the 6 key elements in telling the whole story to reviewers. Every element requested must be addressed within your application. You cannot overlook even one of the elements listed in the scoring criteria, or it can negatively impact your total score, as well as you will not be showing the entire picture of what has been requested. The importance and relevance of cohesiveness. Once again, the importance of cohesiveness in an application cannot be overstated here. Your application must contain all the elements, and you must ensure that you show the relationship of each element to the next. It's all part of telling your story. Cohesiveness ensures that the reviewer can see how each piece fits together to make a strong, compelling funding application that tells the whole story to the reviewers and connects all the dots. An important thing to remember is that a team approach to application development does not lend itself to cohesiveness, mainly because you're seeing 4 different stories written to address one overall application. If you're going to utilize a team effort to write an application, you can do so, but have one person put it together so that the cohesiveness of each of those sections is clearly shown to the reviewer. Now we will take time for questions.
Robert, I have one question here that doesn't necessarily relate to the topic. Do you have any information about the FY13 deadlines?
No, I do not. At this point, it will come out. We will let everybody know as soon as we know when the deadline is available.
And then in a related question, do you have any idea when the funding opportunity announcements for any of the competitions are going to be announced?
Once again, I must respond in the same manner. We do not have any information in relationship to when the funding opportunity announcements will come out or when the deadlines will be for this competition. My advice in terms of writing the applications is don't wait. Utilize what you have available to you now. And should there be any changes, then we can certainly make adjustments then rather than waiting until the funding opportunity announcement does come out, and we can make the changes then. But please start writing your application now based on last year's funding opportunity announcement so that you have a start on what you plan on submitting this year.
Okay, I've got a couple other questions. Excuse me. Have simple flowcharts been used and accepted as a part of the project summary or narrative?
By flowcharts, I'm assuming they probably mean Gantt charts, and I would say I've seen them in applications, yes, and they're good visuals to use as attachments, but I don't see them inside the actual application. A&A does require that the objective work plans, which is an OMB approved form, be utilized. But Gantt charts have been attached in the attachments and actually do provide a good visual of activities to achieve an objective.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about evaluation of the project and if an outside evaluator is okay?
In relationship to evaluation in most cases can pretty much be handled internally. I think it depends on how complex your project is, and if you can justify an external evaluator within your project, then by all means put it into your application. Ultimately, whether that would be an approved cost or not, as with everything within an application, would be up to the Administration for Native Americans. As far as evaluation itself, where you really talk evaluation is when you're talking about results and benefits expected in your impact indicator. That's where you explain how you're going to evaluate whether you've been successful with your project under the outcomes expected section or wherever it may be. That's where I would explain the evaluation methodology that's going to be utilized to show the reviewer that you are successful with your project.
Going back to discussion on the deadlines, how long after the FOAs have been published, how long are people going to have to write their applications before the deadline?
By law, I believe they have between 30 and 45 days. I'm not exactly sure of the exact one, but I believe they're going to have between 30 and 45 days to complete that application.
And there again, it's going to be published in the until the FOAs are published, there's no way of knowing exactly.
Correct.
Okay. You mentioned that leveraged resources shouldn't be in the budget. What if there is a contribution from outside the organization or tribe, for example, a Chamber of Commerce? Could that be included as part of the match amount?
Yes, it could be, but then it wouldn't be considered leveraged resources. Leveraged resources, the definition is anything over and above the non-federal share amount. Obviously, as a grant writer, you want to come up with your non-federal share first, or your match, and then anything over and above that 20% that you're required to come up with would then be put into leveraged resources, which only strengthens your application by showing that you are getting dollars from other agencies to assist you. But if a Chamber of Commerce wants to supply dollars to assist you with your project, and you need it for part of your non-federal share, by all means, utilize it for non-federal share. As long as it's an allowable source and it is utilized for you to achieve your stated goals and objectives, then it's an allowable source.
Back to deadlines. Do you have any idea of when the FOAs will be published?
None whatsoever, period.
Okay. Next one. I'm creating my timeline for the grant and OWP. Will the grant funding be available in September 2013? This affects my OWP.
I would hope so, yes. Rondell, maybe you can speak to that better than I can.
Generally, A&A funds language projects beginning on the 1st of August, and all other projects beginning the 30th of September. We have not been told anything about that being changed. Usually A&A needs to use current dollars before they expire on October 1st, and that is their impetus for having projects start no later than September 30th. So hopefully all of that is going to stay the same. But there again, it's up to the FOA, what's in the FOA. Okay, I've got a couple more coming in. Is A&A still accepting applications for panel reviewers?
As far as I'm aware, yes. But again, they would need to, from the cards we've handed out, they would have to go to the A&A website and sign up. That would be the way that they would find out for sure whether A&A is still accepting panel reviewers. If that notice is still on there on how to become a panel reviewer.
As far as I know, yes, it's still on there. If you have any questions about becoming a panel reviewer, you can call the A&A Help Desk. The Help Desk number is 1-877-922-9262. Again, 1-877-922-9262. I think we are done with questions. Thank you for attending today's webinar. This webinar has been recorded and will be made 508 compliant and then posted on our website probably within no later than 2 weeks from now.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. If you can, please join our Facebook family at Eastern Region TTA Center. You can also contact us via our website, www.anaeastern.org, or our toll-free number on the screen. And again, thank you for participating on our webinar today.